So in closing, what is human nature? We'll prepare for some more information. We're going to be writing for you. What is human nature? That's the question. Human nature refers to the distinguishing characteristics, including ways of thinking, feeling, behavior, that humans tend to have naturally. Okay? Now regarding that, there's an argument between nature versus nurture. Okay? What nature is what we refer to as our genetic inheritance. Okay? That's what nature is. Nurture, on the other hand, refers to environmental factors. That's nurture. So when it comes to our human nature, what is the main component? Now, one of the problems with this whole controversy here is that some people say, no, it's this. Some people say, no, it's that. Truth of the matter is, it is a combination of both. And we want to see what the scriptures teach us regarding that. So we're going to start by investigating what is nature. And we're going to turn to Bereshit, Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. And Yahweh Elohim formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath. The term translated as breath here is neshama in Hebrew. Search that up. The breath of life. And man became a living soul. Okay? We want to compare this to Job chapter 32 and verse 8, which reads, but there is a spirit in man, and the inspiration. Now the word inspiration is the same term that we see in Genesis 2:7 translated as breath. But in this place, the inspiration, same term, neshama, of the Almighty, giveth them understanding. So what we're going to do, we're going to tie these two passages together because they use a common term. The breath of life giveth them understanding. Okay, that's the thought. That's where we're able to use what we refer to as our intellect. We're able to think, feel, and by way of your mind and your emotions, behave. And we're going to tie that into something that Brother Shaul brings up in 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 11, which reads, for what man knoweth the things of a man, save the spirit of man which is in him. Think about that. Same thing that we see in the book of Job, tied into what we read in Genesis. How is it that we come to know what we know? It is because the Spirit, neshama, gives us understanding. Okay? In conclusion of that particular verse, it also makes the comparison. If it's by the Spirit of man that we know things pertaining to this physical world, even so, the things of Allah knoweth no man, but the Spirit of Allah sent. The Spirit of man pertains to what we deal with for the physical world. The Spirit of Allah now pertains to things in the heavens or the spiritual realm. Okay? Now, this breath of life, once again, it enables us to utilize thought. Okay? Now, this is that part of mankind that is covered in the branch of study called psychology. You do a research on the term, the word psychology is rooted in the word psyche, which comes from a Greek term, which means soul. Same term, neshama, also means soul, spirit. Alright? Now, this that we're referring to is something that is inherent in every human being. It's something that we have by, once again, inheritance. But let's take a look at a couple other passages. That being the case, in Genesis chapter 6 and verse 5, it reads, and Elohim saw. In other words, what it's saying, he observed. He looked at humanity. Okay? And Elohim saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. He observed and he saw, he watched, and from watching, from observing, this is what he deduced. He emphasizes that same thought in chapter 8 and verse 21. And Yahweh said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. In other words, he's seen from the time that we come forth and we are children, that we develop evil characteristics. In other words, the thought is, it is inherent within us. But let's move on. In Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 20, similar thought. For there is not a just man upon earth that doeth good and sinneth not. So this sentiment, as far as our sinful nature is concerned, is a thought that has been taught from, as you see, Genesis to Revelation. It is carried on in other passages. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory. You see? So by nature, this is what this tells us. By nature, we have a tendency towards evil. Now, let's tie that into something else that Brother Shaul wrote, which gives a very clear explanation of the struggle that every human being goes through. And what's interesting about this struggle, they portray this struggle a lot of times in cartoons as your good and bad conscience. The good conscience being the angel on one side, the bad conscience being the devil on the other side. Okay? But this is that internal struggle that we all battle against. Remember? For we wrestle not against flesh and blood. You see? So in Romans chapter 7, beginning at verse 14, the scripture reads, for we know that the law is spiritual. Now what Brother Shaul is about to do, he's going to make a contrast between the law being spiritual, but I am carnal. Law, spiritual. We are the total opposite, carnal. Spiritual, carnal, which means fleshly. Then he goes on to say, sold under sin. Now what did he mean by that? We looked at a passage earlier in Romans chapter 6 and verse 16, where the thought behind that passage is this. You are a servant to whom you choose to obey, whether of obedience to righteousness or sin, which is disobedience, to death. We choose to obey. So here's the thought. And we're going to take a look at this story again of Adam and Hawa in the garden.